Overwatch 2 has a problem with its support balance. During the first Overwatch 2 beta, many players in the community complained about the support roster, saying that many of its characters felt defenseless against the faster, more aggressive team fights in 5v5. However, I would argue that the problem was that the support passive in the beta enabled Lucio and Moira to be nearly unkillable, which would naturally make any support that is killable feel a little weak. Although I did agree with most people that at the time, Mercy and Zenyatta needed a little bit of help. And yes, before anyone asks me, I agree with nearly everyone in the Mercy community that the devs should stop touching Guardian Angel and focus on reworking damage boost or res instead or giving her something new. I think what Blizzard has done to Mercy has just been terrible and shows that they're not listening to the diehard support player base, which is bad enough as is. But on the other hand, there's the opposite of the Mercy situation where certain supports are being overbuffed into being so game-breaking that they're pointing out a massive flaw in Blizzard's balance philosophy of the support roster. Let's start with the overpowered supports, namely the one support every streamer, content creator, and pro is talking about, Zenyatta. Zenyatta is too strong. Way too strong. Zenyatta was perceived as a weak support in the first beta, which wasn't entirely inaccurate. But like so many times before, Zenyatta has since been overbuffed into the realm of ridiculous. For those who don't know, Zenyatta now has a total of 225 HP from 200 and has been given a new passive called Snap Kick, which makes his quick melee damage do 45 damage and have a knockback similar to Lucio's Boop. These two buffs together, combined with the insane power of Discord Orb, is too much in a game like Overwatch 2. In my opinion, no form of damage amp outside of maybe Nano Boost should exist in Overwatch 2. Overwatch 1 has always struggled with the balancing of sustain and damage mitigation abilities like Defense Matrix and Barriers, and how damage can get through those tools. I believe one of the primary components for this is because for every damage number in the game, the developers have to balance around what the game is capable of with damage amplifiers. Let's look at heroes like Ashe or Pharah for an example. Ashe's numbers on release were perfectly reasonable until people learned that she could one-shot 200 HP squishies with a damage-boosted headshot while scoped in. And her quick rate of fire while scoped in made her far more devastating than Widowmaker or any other hit scan, or let alone any other DPS in the game. So Ashe's damage was nerfed to prevent the damage-boosted one-shots, but the existence of damage boost continues to bring balance patches towards Ashe because of Dynamite's damage with damage boost, or how quickly she would charge Bob with damage boost, and so on. Pharah is famously known for pairing with Mercy for the pocket healing, but also to help Pharah burst down targets before she's shot out of the sky. This has created a tricky situation for Blizzard, since if Pharah is ever, say, too strong or too weak, it's nearly impossible to balance her properly because rarely, if ever, is Pharah left on her own without a Mercy. Pharah's entire existence is dependent on Mercy, for, mind you, a multitude of reasons, but damage boost is undeniably a sizable portion that factors into that. In the early years of Overwatch, and still somewhat to this day, the same can be said for Tracer and Zen's Discord Orb, albeit to a much smaller degree. Now that I've briefly went over the balancing issues that damage boost can bring, let's focus on Discord Orb. 25% damage taken from all enemy damage sources is an insane ability. It was broken in Overwatch 1, it's even more so in Overwatch 2. With one less tank and less barriers, there's hardly anything stopping Discord Orb from being applied and being easily followed up on. Sure, if you break the line of sight with Zen for 2 seconds, it goes away, but let me remind you that Overwatch's game modes focus around an objective. That means at some point both teams have to contest the objective and be in near permanent line of sight with each other. This means that Discord never goes away in the vast majority of team fights. On top of that, Discord Orb has no duration cap it can reach while in line of sight. It can be applied at surprisingly long ranges, and it has no cooldown, so Zenyatta can change the Discord Orb target whenever he wants with no thought. Discord Orb is brutal to play against as a tank, who desperately rely on their HP pools to tank incoming damage, or rely on defensive cooldowns to close gaps. Discord not only burns through tank HP like wet tissue paper, but it's also a resource that costs nothing, and it can bait tanks into needing to use their defensive cooldowns like their barriers, their matrix, their HP increasing abilities early, just to hopefully make it through the initial mid-fight poke from Zenyatta and his team. On top of that, tanks are the biggest hitboxes out of all the 3 classes, which means that they're the most common focus fire targets, and Discord thrives in focus target calls. That's the entire point of the ability. The worst part of all of this is that tanks rarely have the tools or ability to counterplay Discord Orb. Sure, they can deal with Zen's personal damage for sure, but not the application of the orb itself. If Zen sees you, good luck. I also want to point out that Discord makes the lives of squishy heroes a nightmare too, but not to the same extent. Plenty of cooldowns or heroes' weapons can burn or one-shot other squishies with the Discord Orb, let alone the fact that Discord alleviates the pressure for a team to focus down a harder to hit target. The biggest problem with Zenyatta's recent buffs is that Zen is no longer a glass cannon. Zen was one of, if not the most diveable hero in Overwatch 2, who also happened to possess one of the strongest abilities in the game, which meant that, sure, Discord was punishing as hell, but so were a ton of threats for the Zenyatta, with Snap Kick giving Zenyatta peel on par with Brig, and his increased health pool. Very few heroes can even 1v1, let alone 2v1, a good Zenyatta anymore. Besides movement abilities, Zen has every tool a hero could possibly want, especially versus mobile dive heroes. Let's move on from Zenyatta, as I'm sure all of his issues are very apparent, and if you're anything like me, you're sick of seeing Zenyatta in your games. I want to address another problem I'm seeing in the current Overwatch 2 support balance, which I'm calling Purple Watch, or the debuff problem. Primarily, I'm going to focus on Anti-Nade and the anti-effect in general, but later I'll address the recent Moira change as well. I think if it wasn't for Zenyatta being the OP talk of the town, a lot more people would be talking and complaining about Anti-Nade and the Junker Queen's ultimate. Anti in Overwatch 2 is an absolute death sentence. We're currently seeing this all over the place in Overwatch League's current meta, with Ana Zen debatably being the most dominant support line. Anytime someone in Overwatch 2 is anti'd, they are dead, unless the enemy team misplays or screws up massively. Ana especially highlights this problem since there's only one tank in 5v5, which means less to block or eat anti, but there's a greater issue at hand. If Ana sleeps the tank, what is there to stop her from hitting an anti on everyone else? You see this happening a lot in the Overwatch League with Ana versus Doomfist or Winston compositions, but it's happening all over the place at all levels of play from what I've seen. If a tank is asleep, there's no defense matrix, no bubbles, no barriers, no commanding shout, nothing to stop anti from tearing through your team. Even after the 1 second decrease to anti's duration on Ana, the problem still persists. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm all for Ana being meta or the best support. I love Ana, and Ana players are insanely skilled, and I am incredibly envious of that. But I don't think Ana should have an ability like Anti-Nade in Overwatch 2 that, if used correctly, has such an enormous spike in value that is rarely counterable. Ana's nade alone is better than a good chunk of ultimates. And let's be honest, it's better than Hog's entire kit. I mean, that guy's a mess. I don't want this section to sound like I'm hating on Ana. I mean, don't get me wrong, the rest of her kit is perfectly fine, but I'm bringing this up because this problem also occurs with Junker Queen, however, less often since her ultimate takes a while to charge up. In general, I think all anti-effects currently and in the future need to be a percentage healing debuff. How much of a debuff is up for debate, but no healing, 0%, is too powerful as it currently stands, especially when stacked with any kind of damage amplifying abilities like damage boost or Discord Orb. How are we as players supposed to give feedback to the developers on if the balance between healing and damage metagaining tools is good, if anti and Discord are what's winning the vast majority of team fights and matches? How do we know if a certain DPS are doing too much damage if they rarely have to chunk through healing due to anti-effects? Now, I may be overreacting a bit, but the release of Junker Queen proves that Blizzard is not afraid of repeating utilities or buffs from other heroes onto their new heroes. Junker Queen has an anti-effect, a speed boost, and a group HP increase in her kit, and she's a tank. Sojourn is a DPS with a slow, so they're clearly okay with ability overlap and for those abilities to cross between roles. So if there's ever been a time to speculate on what we do about anti-nades or anti-effects or damage amps or speed increases, the time is now. A new game is just about to come out. Over the years, I've seen players, namely support players, who want to see a new support with a cleanse ability. For those unfamiliar with the terminology, a cleanse is an ability or buff that removes any kind of debuff on your allies, and depending on the cleanse, can even negate stuns or prevent them altogether for a certain period of time. There are several ways to do a cleanse, and if Blizzard were to make a cleanse, who knows what they'll do for it. But here's my concern about Overwatch 2's supports. With the release of Moira's new orb that weakens enemies, making a target do 75% less damage over 4 seconds, which is insane by the way, people are surviving diva bombs, it's becoming clear that Blizzard wants supports to be the primary debuffers in the game. This is already problematic, as in the current beta, a character can be antied and weakened, or weakened and discorded, or discorded and antied. And now with Junker Queen in the roster, it's even possible to get antied, discorded, weakened, and speed boosted all at once from the same team. These are all hypothetical situations, but my point stands. There's already a lot of debuffs and a lot of debuff combinations in the game, and we only have 7 supports. If we added a cleanse, whether it be single target like Zarya's bubble or an AoE cleanse, I'm worried the game will devolve into requiring a cleanse hero on your team just to circumvent the overpowered debuffs already in the game. What if Overwatch 2 becomes focused on cooldown cycling again, and we end up in a meta where each team is trying to bait out each other team's cleanse cooldown and then pushing with their anti or discord or weaken after? How would you even cleanse discord, since Zen in theory would just reapply it again since it has no cooldown? Would a cleanse hero make Ana's utility useless? Would anyone run an Ashe or Junker Queen if a hero could just cleanse away their damage over time? If we're too cautious about adding an overpowered cleanse and its nerf to the ground in development, then what's the point of having a cleanse? We must be very careful about adding a cleanse to Overwatch and how it's balanced and implemented. Otherwise, we're going to end up in a cleanse debuff meta, or nothing will change and all the purple support utility will continue to confirm the majority of all teamfight kills like it is right now. And now that Moira has a 75% weaken, it seems like debuffs like Anti and Discord will be needed more than ever to try to compete or make up for the damage decrease that weaken brings. I'm very worried about supports and how Blizzard is balancing them, which is a shame because I want to be excited for new support heroes. We haven't gotten a new support hero for 3.5 years. But if this is how they're balancing them, I'm really nervous. I want Blizzard to really think and talk with the community on what supports should be and what they should do, and be more effective in their communication on what support mains are looking for with their hero reworks, so we don't end up with another Mercy Guardian Angel situation again. As a Lucio main myself, I personally want more heroes like Lucio with a niche and a buff that puts ownership on Lucio and his coordination with the team, rather than debuffs or buffs that just pad stats. I want to see more playmaking for supports. I want to see maybe more slippery mobility options instead of debuffing enemies or relying on insane damage potential. I want to see heroes that enable comps more rather than just destroy and hard counter other comps. I actually think Symmetra and her teleporter could be a good foundation for a support rework in the future. Though to Blizzard's credit, I do like the emphasis on supports having to take duels with their damage more often and frag out more. That playstyle is already what I loved as an aggressive peel Lucio, and I love that the skill set's moved on to more supports. But what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think of the support debuffs, aka Purple Watch, as I'm gonna call it, or a cleanse support? I look forward to reading the comments and talking with you all, but I think we as support players and players of other roles have to be more vocal on this matter now to help Blizzard in the future with the support role. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope you all have an amazing week. Peace.